Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here again for the concluding and I think highlight session of Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Europe. We're going to be talking about supply chain management as a competitive advantage. For those of you who've been with us the last 2 days, for those of you who've been living through this industry the last 2+ years, there's no doubt what a role the supply chain has played in mitigating the challenges that we're all facing. In some cases, overcoming them. In other cases, certainly succumbing to them. That's part of it right now. So the visibility of supply chain management as a function, the role that it's playing has certainly gone up to high levels. As I said earlier, I'm not sure if anyone remembers the time when supply chain management wasn't a topic of conversation on the lips of world leaders or front-page newspapers or media conversations around the globe. But it is now, and therefore, for OEMs, tier suppliers, you can be sure it's being talked about at the highest levels, at board levels, probably daily. Can and is it be a competitive advantage? Can it help to really gain market share? Can it help us to succeed? Well, we heard earlier from Toyota examples where very tactically and flexibly in a lean process managing the supply chain had a role to play in helping Toyota gain market share. Already a very interesting example, I think. We know OEMs have had to prioritize production based on availability, in many cases prioritizing based on margin, and helping as well for companies to therefore mitigate some of the impacts of the past few years. That's certainly examples. But what about when we look further, when we look to the transformation that is actually really going to change this industry, when we look at electrification, connectivity in vehicles, new business models, and of course, perhaps the biggest challenge of all, sustainability. Supply chain management has a critical role, a highly strategic role to play in all those areas. And that's why for this session, we wanted to conclude with several leading supply chain leaders who could answer our questions on that role that it should play across OEMs, and as well as your questions, and conclude our event in that way. So it's my pleasure to welcome our two guest panelists. Our first guest I'd like to introduce has worked more than 20 years in the automotive logistics industry, a large period of that with General Motors, different regions, including South Africa and Asia, and in North America with a global strategy role. Joined Volvo in 2021 to lead its global inbound logistics and packaging. Ladies and gentlemen, very pleased to welcome Sean Bricknell. Thank you, Sean. And our other panelist here has worked for Audi and Volkswagen for more than 30 years in areas across logistics, steering, plant logistics, cost optimization, production systems, and product line management. Took over his current role as head of Audi supply chain in 2019, where he has full oversight of the supply chain. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to welcome Dieter Braun. Thank you, Dieter. Welcome. So please join us. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a fireside chat here again. I'll have plenty of questions, but I will look to the audience as well. I'm keen to get you involved. Thank you again for joining us. Gentlemen, I wanted to start with the premise of the panel. Supply chain management as a competitive advantage for automotive. Is it? If so, why? If not, what can we do to make it, or should we? Sean, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, of course, we've spoken about it a lot over the last 2 days. Historically, we've really been viewed as a cost center, and we've made our difference by becoming more cost effective or increasing efficiencies. But over the last 2 years, we've seen the difference that we've made to the business itself in terms of being able to increase revenue, profitability of the company during this crisis. And then, as you said, also looking forward, a lot of us are in the process of changing our commercial models. And so from that perspective, we would play a big role in that too.
Nobody thinks about his health until his health starts to fail. So what has changed with supply chain management is the awareness. So today, everybody can experience what it means if a Chinese city is in a lockdown or the Suez Canal is blocked in his personal life. And these effects have put supply chain management on the table again. And we as supply chain management can prove that we can smoothen the problems or even heal them. And that is what is, I think, deeply understood now within the companies and in the broader public.
So certainly the awareness and visibility has gone up. We're lurching from one crisis to the next, as we've talked about throughout this event. A new never normal, a supply chain of chaos, there's been several ways that we've phrased it. In this context, how should logistics organizations, and you both oversee global organizations within your respective companies, how have they had to change to keep up? I'll start with you again, this time, Dieter.
So imagine firefighters forming a circle of chairs and beginning to discuss who should rescue the crying child in the burning house. So when it comes to a crisis, your organization has to be prepared. And prepared means that everybody within the organization had the informations that he needs to take action. That everybody is working beyond a common goal. And the goal has to be pretty clear. And that everybody has deeply understood what is his role for the global achievement. And that is what you have to make clear before the crisis appears. So I strongly recommend that you go deep into your organization and every time investigate if based on these ideas, it's up to date. And when it's like that, then the next crisis can come.
Sure.
Yeah, I think what we've learned. Well, firstly, I'm extremely proud of my team and what they've done over the past 2 years in this chaotic environment and the results that they've achieved. But it's exhausting and it's not sustainable. And so what the changes we've made is we've had to understand what is causing. We know what's causing that, but what root causes can we go and look at, and how can we work differently, and how can we change our value chains and make them more robust? And so I think from that perspective, we've done a lot of focusing on that, and then as Dieter mentioned, the importance of collaboration within our organization has also generated some good opportunities.
What you referred to there, Sean, I imagine, I know from speaking to you and your peers, the firefighting that needs to happen, the task force approach, the war rooms, so to speak, that I think began right from the start of lockdowns to track every part and keep try to maintain production where it could. I see that as, in many ways, has reinforced collaboration, but again, as you mentioned, Sean, it's firefighting, and it's perhaps not always strategic. It's in the moment. How can we take a more strategic approach? Where are you already doing that? I'll turn to you, Dieter.
I think logistics is people business. And as Sean mentioned, it depends on our teams. Our success depends on our teams. So what we have to do, we have not only to prepare our organization, we have to prepare our employees. And we make a yearly revision of our supply chain strategy at Audi. And last year, as one big key insight from this crisis management of the last 2 years, we have set up a new field of action, what we called team.work. And within that, we have an initiative, for example, that's called empowerment. And the empowerment is not so much about technical issues. The empowerment is about decision-taking on the lowest level possible, and it's about lifelong learning, and a lot of other stuff, of course. But I strongly recommend to invest in your people. Overall, in logistics, it's the key success factor.
Yeah. I touched on it earlier. for us to be successful, to really make a difference and work quickly, as you say, and empower people, we had to bring people together. We had to bring, historically, where perhaps we weren't as close within our organization. So that collaboration within Volvo Cars from the different areas to understand each other, make quick decisions, that really made a big difference for us. Of course, also closer relationships with our logistics partners was another learning that we're really trying to grow. And then probably a third element is it's resulted in let's say an acceleration in where we want to go from our digital technology perspective.
With that is acceleration, Dieter referred to the awareness. Has that helped provide more scope for investment, maybe either to trial things or unlock some investment in particular systems or areas? For years, when we're speaking about digitalization in logistics, we talk of quite short ROIs, so it's not always easy to implement big change. But has this come with this awareness as well? Maybe Sean, on the back of what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we said, our CEOs and CFOs, they're all understanding the importance of supply chain management and what we need to do to stay ahead. And so there's a willingness to continue in investing in this area. We've recently made some investments, but also as Volvo Cars, we have some ambitious growth targets, and to be able to manage that additional complexity and volume, further automation, further digital technology is definitely a requirement. So, yeah, for sure.
Actually, we had already started a big digitalization program right before the crisis. It is a group-wide digitalization program because it wouldn't make sense to do it only as Audi. But to be honest, here in the audience, there is still a far way to go for us until we are at that point where I want us to be. So there's a lag that we still have to cover.
Mm-hmm. They say that we should never let a good crisis go to waste. I think we have more than a few to choose from at the moment. But in managing these crises, what are some of the key lessons that you're implementing across your organizations that you want to make sure don't get forgotten when and if we have some version of normalization again? Sean?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a bit earlier. This crisis has exposed some of our weaker value chains, let's say, and so what it's encouraged us to do is, obviously we need to go and do a fix right now, but really to bring in various parts of the organization to make those more robust. So I think that's one element, and then the continued and accelerated investment in digitalization is something else that's, let's say, a positive coming out of this, this crisis.
What we have learned is that I call it speed is king. And to speed up, I come back to my point of one of the last questions, we have to empower people. That's one thing, that we can take decisions even faster and not go through this bottleneck of high management decisions that are needed to take big decisions. If we stop this plant, if we don't stop this plant, if we run this line, if we don't run this line. We have to take them very, very, very fast because the supply chain is reacting very, very fast. We have to be very flexible. This morning we heard the discussion of Toyota, and I think we have a little bit of different approach. We invest more in flexibility, and that requires speed. So one more time, one of the key takeaways was to speed up. That makes us successful. Mm-hmm. And another key takeaway, which also is in this team.work initiative, it's the resilience, but the resilience of the people. We have another project that's about the resilience of the supply chain, but the resilience of the people. If people have to speed up, if people have to manage crises 2 years in a row, then you need a very resilient team and organization to deliver good results still And I don't expect the crisis to be finished right now. So we need to go on and hold on. And that's why we are investing in resilience of our teams as well.
And it's an excellent point, not least the mental well-being of teams to be able to sustain and work in these environments. So this empowerment obviously will certainly play a key role. Sean, you mentioned, or you echoed from my introduction around the business models that Volvo is looking at changing, but different areas we can talk about there, whether it's online, whether it's electrification, whether it's prioritization of certain vehicles. Can you, stepping back from some of those changes, without going into the detail perhaps of what each company is doing, what role do you see the supply chain playing in them?
Yeah, so in terms of, let's say, the new commercial models that some of us are exploring, there's certainly going to be quite a big impact on the planning and distribution aspects of our business in terms of how we support that. There's behind the slick website or the commercial offering, there is a back-end machine that needs to deliver on the promises that we're going to be making. And I think of my 19-year-old daughter and what she would expect in terms of ordering a car. She doesn't really want to go to a dealership like I would. She wants to be able to order it from the couch on her phone and have it delivered like Amazon does. So I think there's a change. There's a change in some of our future customers, and it's a big impact for us in the supply chain side for us to be able to meet those requirements.
Looking ahead to your future customers as well, are you already seeing the supply chain play a role?
I totally agree with what Sean has said about our future customers. No? It's how they are. And we have to fulfill their requirements. No? The direct impact in the supply chain business, it depends on the circumstances. No? The way we sell cars in the United States or in China is completely different to the way we are selling cars in Europe. No? It depends on the complexity of the car, that the customer is choosing the car. And then, based on this, you have to decide how you have to react in a supply chain management. The only thing we have to respond to, of course, no? But for me, one key point as well, and we are far away from this now, is the reliability. If we fix a date for the car to be delivered to the customer, we should be sure about it. We almost have forgotten this thing in the last 2 years because we are happy when we can deliver a car at all. But at the end, he will take a day free, a day off, will collect his car in Ingolstadt, for example. So we have to be sure that that's the day, because around that there is a kind of a planning. Besides that, there are online buyers and online distribution expected, but there are still coming a lot of people to collect their cars, and they have the wish to do it. Yeah. So reliability is a big thing to be reached again after the crisis.
Yeah.
Yes, and as you point out, I mean, someone ordering online is going to expect to see when, and expect that to be accurate. And any updates will need to also be updated accurately and often. You mentioned speed earlier, Dieter, as a key kind of takeaway. And I can see that in the context of the crisis. I can also see it in the context of the way the industry is changing as well. When we look at electrification, connectivity, compressed model development cycle times, battery gigafactories going up within the space of years. So we see changes in supply chain, I think, happening not along the traditional 7-year cycle times, maybe that we long have since worked on. What impact is that having, and might that further have on how you plan to manage supply chains?
Maybe it will surprise you, but I would say it will have no impact. And of course, I'm not speaking about the way we have to transport batteries or batteries are produced. No? That's a special point, and I think that was not your question in detail. No? I think logistics is all about bringing goods from A to B. That's what it is, that's what it was, and that's what it will be. And if we are bringing parts for electrical cars or parts for combustion engines, doesn't matter. If we have to plan again our network every 7 years, every 3 years, or every year, doesn't matter. The way we are doing it has to do with speed. That's the impact. No? And the drivers nowadays for me is not so much the electrical combustion thing, it's more the decarbonization and the cost pressure that we are suffering right now from the rising fuel prices or rising freight costs to deliver a cost-effective logistics for our customers. So these are the drivers, and the answer for me is speed. And that's why we have this strategic approach to the speed thing.
Sean, how do you feel on that?
Yeah, I think I agree. Speed is absolutely, we are moving faster in our development programs, and things are changing fast. What we're moving is a bit different from historically what we've moved, so we have to adjust for that. But in general, it's more of the same and faster of the same and more flexible. And to achieve that, it's collaboration early on in the process to make sure that we really have the right decisions made and influence the right decisions. Yeah.
We'll go deeper into some of that, but I wanted to step back for a moment, look at both of your organizations sort of briefly, because they've recently seen some changes, and that I'm sure also reflects how you manage a strategic supply chain. Dieter, when you took the role, I think it was shortly after that brand logistics and plant logistics were combined, having previously been managed separately. Can you talk a little bit about why that was done and what the impact has been?
So it was previously before. I took over the responsibility at that time for the brand logistics. Then we merged the brand logistics and the 5 plant logistics. And we didn't only have changed the dotted and solid lines. Actually, we deconstructed the whole organization and built it up again on new principles. And maybe you can imagine in a year-long grown organization, organically growing, there was nothing standardized. So we built it up again based on the principles. One of this is end-to-end responsibility. Other principle was process leads, organization follows. We have implemented a matrix organization with strong, centralized, guided, but with local sitting people, departments, and local responsibilities that cover a one face to the customer. The customer, in that sense, is the head of the plant, for example, with a one face to the customer principle. And this matrix organization, as every matrix organization, has its challenges, but it provides us the ability, with clear structures and clear responsibilities, to act faster and to go our long way that we have to go to standardize our processes. Because honestly, there was nothing standardized at the Audi plants, almost nothing. Because over the years, the plants have developed their own ways. All of these ways had their logic. But if you see it in a holistic view, you know there is nothing that can beat standardization, even if you talk about digitalization, because it's the base for digitalization. So we implemented brand-wide working groups to focus on this standardization thing. And we have we have still a way to go. We have reached some results, but we have still a way to go. So at the end, we had an organization that it's leaner. We took out a lot of positions, around 20%, that it's leaner, that it's faster. And fortunately, we finished this organization 2 months before the Corona outbreak. So that was the first proof of concept. And as Jean said, I will thank my team And I thank the new organization because it would have been a nightmare for me to be the responsible for Audi, to guide this, to steer this without a new organization. So it was a great thing, and I would do it again.
What in looking at that, in that case, the lockdowns and disruptions that followed, what might be an example of where it actually helped to mitigate or helped you to better manage that?
I mentioned it before, no? If you have a lot of players in your network, everybody follows his own optimum. So, and that is difficult. If you have a given quantity of semiconductors, you have to achieve an overall optimum for Audi and not a local optimum for plant A and another local optimum for plant B. And what we could do based on this organization, we could figure out which is the best way for Audi, decide it, and then there was no discussion about that is the way. That was a big help,
Yeah. Sean, we've been speaking with Volvo over the past 2+ years as it's actually longer really, going back to its insourcing, if you like, 10 years ago, but more recently, building up and integrating the global team, covering planning, operations, S&OP, packaging. Can you talk a little bit about how this changing organization, has impacted your responsibility on the global inbound and packaging?
Yeah, so it's been good to bring that team together, similar to what Dieter said in terms of also having that global visibility. By being in one team and in one room, instead of reacting to a decision that's made in another area, we are together making those decisions, feeding information in, critical information, perhaps on time-sensitive decisions, and it's enabled us to really be fast and choose the right solution to achieve the results that we needed. So I think that's been very beneficial, and it's certainly working for us. Yeah.
And when you look at something specifically like packaging, Dieter emphasized the importance of standardization, and that's a classic area where standardization is important and sometimes quite challenging. Has that been a key focus for you?
Yeah, it's an area that needs some more work. I think perhaps like some other global OEMs, we don't always have a standard packaging solution in different regions. There's different things available. There's different truck sizes. But we try to at least have the same processes, standardized processes in place. But I think it's an area that we're going to be focusing on in the future because there's more opportunity there.
Yeah. And of course, Dieter, Audi sits within the wider group, and in that context, there is a structure with group logistics that also handles wider synergies. Has the recent, let's say, shifts in the industry forced even deeper synergies or need to find further? Are there examples where you've worked more closely, whether it's across other brands in the group or you're sharing platforms, for example?
Yes, we try to go even deeper than we did in the past. And I have to mention that we had a very good collaboration with Volkswagen Group Logistics. We were working successfully for the last years with clear role definition, who is doing what. And we could leverage some synergies, for example, in the group-wide container management that has proven cost effectiveness. No? Now we want to go even further, because what you can see in our group is that the platform business, that means different brands are using the same platform. The thing is growing. And for example, our Zwickau plant of Volkswagen, there's the ID.3 of Volkswagen, the ID.4, the Audi Q4 e-tron, and the Skoda and the Seat models. And what we are going to implement is the one-for-all principle. So for example, the Zwickau plant, Volkswagen has made all of the logistic planning and is operating the whole logistic process. If it's an Audi or if it's a Volkswagen. No? And in the past, that wasn't too clear. We were in some kind of logistic planning as well. We have this very clear. In the future, we are going to produce a Cupra from Seat in our Győr plant. And of course, there we will do all the logistics planning, of course, as well the logistics operation. And we are using all the synergies possible. Also, these are two plants, and they have two different decision ways for their products. In the logistics points of view, it should be the same. It should be the same for optimization and for planning.
There is even areas, if you like, that go deeper. With Audi is part of the Braun group now, I believe, which also groups Lamborghini and Bentley. So is that also even within these clusters? And with Porsche, there's the shared platform too. Does these clusters bring even closer collaboration and across the suppliers and providers that serve them as well?
So Bentley has joined the premium group recently. Of course, in the past, there was not too much collaboration. Lamborghini is part of Audi for quite a long time. And what we could provide to Lamborghini, that was transport planning activities. So it's the inbound sector. And when Bentley joined our premium group, we used this event to standardize as well the form we are collaborating with Lamborghini and with Bentley. And it's the same thing with Bentley as well. They are looking for synergies in the inbound concept. No? And if you map the Audi plants and the Bentley plant in Europe, you can see there's quite a form of a corridor with Brussels, Neckarsulm, Ingolstadt, Győr, no? And Crewe, of course, no? And we try to bring in a train solution for this corridor, no? That allows us to improve inbound synergies. And we have connection in front of the Neckarsulm plant to Lamborghini to connect them to our network that already exists. And we want to go even further with this. But basically, it's the inbound synergy that we are using in Premium Group.
Yeah, but clear opportunities there. I'm next going to go deeper into this idea of forward planning and front loading the supply chain. Although before I go deeper, I also want to make sure I leave it open for the audience. If there's any questions or comments, just put a hand up, and we do have microphones across the room. But as you think about those further, I think this was alluded to by both Dieter and Sean. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about how you're working to integrate logistics, costs, risks, and factors into the forward planning of models and wider decision making in the group, front loading, as we might call it. Dieter, can you talk a bit more about how that's working at Audi?
From the very beginning of a decision for a new product, our supply chain organization forms part of the development teams to bring in the logistic cost perspective or the design for logistics perspective. And of course, we are strongly interacting with the purchase department to think about the sourcing, the localization. And product design paths the way for a cost-competitive sourcing. If you are able to design well-thought modules, maybe you can locate them in front of your plant. If you don't think from the very beginning about this subject, at the end, you have a cost calculation, and up to now, very often, logistics costs still don't change a decision. But if you do a good product design, you have a key to combine both good material costs and good logistics costs, and as well, good or zero emission almost.
Yeah. Sean, what about at Volvo? I'm sure this is the intention, but has there been a shift, if you like, to apply this in a new and different way?
Yeah, no, it's very similar to what Dieter described. It's vital for us to be part of that decision or that strategy right up front. So in terms of where we, who is the partner that we purchase the material from, we design the part for logistics as well. So we make sure that there's not specific design elements that really drive up logistics costs and CO2. But the same thing, we as logistics have to be part of that process. We have to be part of that strategy to be able to influence the right end-to-end costs. Yeah, it's key to our success going forward. Yeah.
Let me add one thing. No? We are going to construct a new plant in China, where Audi has the majority. No? It's still a joint venture, but Audi has the majority. So we have a different responsibility to the logistics planning compared to the joint ventures that we are operating now. No? And there, the interaction from the very first day was not only on the product design, it was also on the plant construction. No? And we changed the plant layout, really, because we made with purchase an agreement, and that had a big impact on the plant design, but a very cost-effective impact. No? So that's where you can see that integrated supply chain planning, you have to act from the very first beginning to achieve. If the plant is constructed, you don't get these effects one more time.
When it comes to this sort of forward planning, it feels in some ways that the history is less reliable a guide than it might have been previous. If we were going on historical container shipping costs and risk factors and lead times into this. And as we heard in a session earlier, this has been more than doubled in the lead time in 2 years, and we know what the costs have done, and who knows where they're going. So how can you account for this rapid shift and potentially, structural change, if you like, in some of the logistics costs and risks that we're facing when it comes to forward planning and influencing those decisions? Yeah, Dieter, sorry, if you could start.
I think it's very difficult to anticipate how the transport market will be in 2 or 3 years. And if you're talking about a new plant in China, then it will start to operate within this time, and then it will operate for the motorcycle 7 years or something like that. No? So I think you have to do 2 things. No? You have to make your planning and then try to figure out the sensitiveness. No? And based on this, make a risk analysis. If it wouldn't be better to change a decision that's now economically fair, but if this happens and there's a potential situation when this could happen, it would be with less risk to take another, for example, sourcing solution or warehouse solution or whatever. No? So we try to combine these 2 things, but we go on with the given data, we make an expectation, and we try to go a middle way between these 2.
Similar for you, Sean? Or?
Yeah. It certainly has been a little bit. We've gone back and we've perhaps looked at some decisions we made a year or 2 ago on data that was, I guess, pretty out of date now when you look at what freight rates are. So yeah, you tend to second guess yourself, but we have to make sure that what we're doing, like Dieter said, we have to look at where do we think the rates are going to be, and they might not be where they are today. But we've also become a little bit more risk averse. I think we've learned over the last couple of years that we've always had supply chain disruptions, but we've had some pretty severe ones now, and I think our appetite for that risk is reducing, and so that is certainly influencing the way we participate in these decisions and make these decisions going forward.
Maybe one more question from me, and then I think we have an audience question. One more question on how we influence, and this was brought up by someone earlier. Traditionally, especially in the premium market, there is an extreme level of customization variation. I remember the first time I went to Ingolstadt and I was explained how many variations of the model. I mean, it was 50 to the 50th or something like that. I mean, it's sort of incalculable. But of course, the complexity that this variation and customization brings, on one hand, is a key advantage, but on the other hand, it causes more challenges in the supply chain. So how important or how much of a role do you or should supply chain management have in simplifying, quite frankly, some of these supply chains? I'll start with you, Dieter.
In the product development process, it's our role to be the guide during running through this complexity jungle. But honestly, of course, zero variance would be the best for a supply chain guy. But if at the end the customer wants it, and if at the end the customer pays for it, then I have to do it. No? Because my cost compared to the price that we can take would be minor. So I think the intelligence is how can we to deliver to the customer what he wants without causing or creating too much complexity. But one more time, if the customer wants it and pays for it, then I will do it and I will organize it.
And Volvo?
Yeah, we're exploring that. I think our future commercial model may result in perhaps less complexity than we have today, the millions of variations that there are. And like Dieter said, what our role that we play is to demonstrate the advantages of reducing some of that complexity, whether it's complexity in the vehicle, complexity in the supplier base, and how that translates to cost and the ability to react quickly to customer demand.
Yeah. I think we had a question in the audience. Yep. Say your name and company.
Hello, it's Gina from ICL. I have a question for Herr Braun. You mentioned resilience. I just wanted to know, how do you bring about resilience to your workforce concretely? Because sometimes this is an innate trait that humans have. You're empathetic or you're not. You're resilient or you're not. So I'm just wondering what type of activities you have, or is it just adding more manpower to support the team or trainings? And the same then for Sean, how do you motivate your tired team? They're stressed. What are concrete actions that you took or are taking to motivate them and help them go through this crisis phase?
So, not to go too deep into theory, but you have this organizational resilience, this team resilience, and the personal resilience. And we try to work on all the three of these things. And one thing is you must make people aware of the problems. Our teams, and I think it's the same thing as Sean mentioned, are very dedicated because you have a direct response to your activity. If leaving the office in the evening, you have saved maybe 1,000, 2,000 cars for Audi for the production in 2 weeks. So that's a very good feeling, but you have to be careful that you don't burn by every day fighting. So what we are doing, we try to make people aware that there is a risk. And we do this on the management level and on the shop floor level as well. No? That people understand that we like them to work, but they have to be careful of themselves. And I give this impulse by myself, for example, in meetings of the management, where I say, for me it's important that you stay healthy, and please check yourself. And we have programs going on where people, for example, in little small discussion groups, express what they have suffered, and other employees can listen to that. And of course, at the end, it's their responsibility. What we're trying to make more attractive is to talk about the things, and that it's a good thing to say stop, because now there's a potential to burn myself. No? And we hope by creating these discussions, and we go on for this since a year and a half, that more and more people will get involved in the process, and that will make the organization and the people within the organization more healthy. No? That's basically the idea.
Sean, do you have anything?
Yeah, it's not easy. We're focusing really on three different things, I guess. One is we're trying to just restructure our organization a little bit as we it's dynamic what we're living in. So we need to be flexible and agile and change the structure to see where we need to boost horsepower, let's call it. The second bit is I'm challenging my management team. You have your superstars in your team, and you always go there because you know they're going to deliver, but then we tend to overload them. And so it's really challenging the team to identify who the next superstars, perhaps just below in the shadow, and let's develop them and give them an opportunity to shine. Spread the workload a bit. And then thirdly, look for things that we can stop doing. Look for things that we can automate, and try to reduce this workload. Yeah.
Very good points. Again, if there's any questions, up there, Paulina.
Hi, Paulina from JLR. When you talked about digitalization and how important speed in that aspect is, a small question in terms of very big aspect of it, where do you take the resources from? Every company in the world right now wants the coders, developers, and data analysts, and I think everybody's equally struggling with that know-how. What's your strategy to collect those people or attract them to your company?
You want to start with that, Dieter?
Of course, you're right. there is a problem. But I want to widen a little bit. If you take these two things, how can we speed up based on digitalization? And how can we make this possible without all these data analysts? Well, I will give you an example. Before, every 4 weeks, we made a production program with all the adjustment needed to make a production program. Now, within the crisis, we have to decide every week. Not on an operational level, that's every day, every hour, every minute, no? On a planning level. Every week for the second week after this week where we decide. And guess how many possible alternatives with a given quantity of semiconductors we have to decide how we will allocate the semiconductors. It's 11 trillion only for Audi. 45 models, 13 lines, 8 plants. 11 trillion. So what we did, we automized, connected a lot of data, and we didn't include any data analysts. Huh? We made it with our own people. And of course, it's kind of an Excel-based solution. That's not what we want at the end. It's not what we want. But this one and a lot of bots that we have in operation now to automate these boring tasks that we have, can provide you a lot of moving forward without these big IT projects. And I think there's a lot of potential still in the organization with these little small projects where you can bring people together, make them collaborate, bring in the new guys, then are a bit more IT related than we are, for example, and they can provide solutions. Other way, empower your people, and they will bring a big move forward, and in parallel, go for the big IT projects, but they will last.
Somewhere someone is very excited about the pivot table for that 11 trillion, supporting that in Excel. And again, I'll ask more questions, but please just hand up at any time, take advantage of this opportunity to exchange. I was at Audi a few years ago at Ingolstadt, and I had an opportunity to see, I think, an early pilot of what's called the Supermarket 2.0. If we come back to some of the digitalization and maybe some of the bigger digitalization projects going on, a goods-to-man sort of system there. I mean, how much, Dieter, this is for you obviously, how much of an impact would you say this technology is having on Audi's space saving and sort of logistics efficiency?
We have implemented the Supermarket 2.0, which is basically the goods to the person principle in some areas of the commissioning process. and in these areas based on good conditions. No? It's not worth implementing it in every commissioning zone, but there where it fits, it provides a 25% reduction of space and a 25% reduction of the needed workforce. So it's a big jump, but you have to be very clear where it fits and where it doesn't fit. No? For example, in our new China plant, as I've mentioned before, we will use it heavily because there we can create the circumstances that fit perfectly to this process.
Yeah, obviously the greenfield opportunity to have designed that from the very beginning. Absolutely. Sean, where would you identify some of the strategic needs to, you mentioned earlier that you're starting to explore IT system to upgrade. When you look at your inbound and packaging, where do you see some of the strategic needs to invest in update digital systems?
So we have a road to go, and I think it's actually quite difficult to keep up with the pace of what's being developed. So we know there's lots out there. We've recently, I think I mentioned, we've recently secured some upgraded network engineering tools or tool that we believe is going to help us a lot. But again, to really be able to cope with the increased volumes and complexity, we need to look at our TMS and operating systems as well. And so, I think there's some opportunity there for us to improve that. It's certainly an important aspect of what we've got to do. And I know that there's some good products out there today. And maybe just to touch on the question, I think exactly what you said in terms of what we've also got people doing little things, but in parallel we really need to look at those bigger term things. And our IT department is also very, very stretched, and so I think commercial off-the-shelf products are really the way to go to enable us to move fast without having to develop stuff ourselves.
Absolutely. You mentioned China, Dieter, in terms of the plant that's coming there. Excuse me, you both have important operations in China. We've observed the pace of digitalization to be often faster, very fast in China, perhaps sometimes faster than elsewhere. Do you see it influencing other regions as well? You may have started with you, Sean, at Volvo, at least.
So my team in China is, they've got this pursuit. They are really, eager to try new things, new systems, processes, ways of working, and it's a great almost sandbox, for us to test things out. And it's really been fantastic to be able to try things out, not be concerned about if something doesn't work the way we want it to, no problem, we move on. But there've been some really good examples of things that we've then been able to roll out to other parts of the world. So it works well, and it's like you say, there's an appetite for that.
I completely agree with what Sean has said, but I want to make a little different approach additionally. I think we should be able to maintain or even develop the ability to distinguish what is a mere hype and what is really disruptive innovation that will provide us on the long run opportunities or cost savings or something like that. And there is let's name it, a little challenge in China. A lot is like a playground. They want to have everything. And I think it's our task not to invest resources, to come back to the question that we had, the lack of resources to make IT projects and such stuff. We have to distinguish what is hype and what is a disruptive innovation. And if we can decide this and recognize, then we have to go straight forward and invest heavily in the disruptive innovation and not try to figure out every toy for every boy.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. I want to sort of maybe round down our conversation around again, what possibly will be the biggest strategic challenge that we face, and that is, of course, sustainability. And we've spent a lot of sessions where we've gone into some of the detail and complexity. I won't ask to repeat that in terms of availability of certain fuels and technology right now, but how are you with your organizations and your suppliers and providers, how are you working to hasten this transition to renewable energy, low carbon freight transport? Where are the key factors, places where you're starting, and where you obviously recognize you need to move faster? I'll start with you there, Dieter.
Talking about decarbonization?
Yes, sorry, decarbonization. Yeah.
So I've mentioned the corridor before, no?
Yeah.
And we try to use it by train, and we try to connect all the suppliers for the different plants that we have in this corridor. And maybe, and that's what provides the integrated organization, maybe there's an extra cost for a plant in Hungary, but can be cost effective for the plant in Neckarsulm. And the overall cost is what counts. So we try to make an optimum and to bring the most of the goods possible on the train and to get a high frequency within this corridor. But of course, additionally, the truck transport will play an important role because the train capacity is very restricted in Europe, and the location of the suppliers is very often very far from the next train station to load. No? So we are convinced that bio-LNG would be a bridge to a future where electric trucks are available, and the electric trucks can provide a stable service. So it's not so much about the truck that's going the last mile, it's more about the truck that is able to drive 500 kilometers or something like that in a regular transport. But meanwhile, the electric transport is not available. We have to bridge it with bio-LNG. There are some challenges with the availability in all the regions of Europe, but we are working on a plan, on a rollout plan to implement this.
So that was going to be my follow-up. Is that at an Audi or perhaps a group level to work with your carriers to identify that availability or support with the investment? Because it's not something you can do alone. Obviously, you need your carriers to be, providers to be going there with you.
Not only the carriers, you need the big companies, the petrol companies, or whoever will provide this type of gasoline, no? If they make it available in that region to a given time when we need it. And then make a plan for Europe at the beginning, make a plan when we can use or change which region due to this plan.
Sean, on the inbound side, I mean, firstly, taking the point on rail, is there been a push to use more rail inbound for Volvo, particularly in Europe or perhaps in other regions? And is there scope you see to go further with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Rail is, moving to rail is one of our key initiatives to reduce our carbon footprint. We're quite proud of having also a similar kind of thing where we have cargo moving by rail. It's then in Sweden moved by trucks using renewable energy. I think about just under 100% of our LTL network in Sweden is renewable. It runs on renewable energy. It's definitely, I think, one of the quicker ways. Because as we know, the technology is taking its time to get to where it needs to be. But moving to rail, you can do fairly fast. I think that there's capacity now, but we're going to start seeing some challenges from a capacity perspective on rail if we're not proactive now. And we need to work on that.
So then, and as you mentioned, so in Scandinavia, there's already a strong alternative fuel approach with the LTL network, though.
Yeah, there is. Unfortunately, it's not available everywhere globally. No. So you can't do that everywhere. But I think, as Volvo Cars, we've been pretty outspoken in terms of our values and what we believe is right. And I think it's our responsibility to challenge our industry, our OEMs and tier ones, to go down this road, for us all to be lobbying government to go where we need to go. And we choose logistics partners who have the same ambitions, so that we can, I think there are a lot out there, we've seen a lot out there who are willing to go down this road, but we as their customers need to show the commitment to be there behind them, to encourage them and show them that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. As Dieter mentioned, the electric truck technology is not there at a mass scale yet. I mean, there are some niche and small examples. This morning we heard from Volvo Group showing an electric car carrier and some pilot implementation there. But taking the long view here, are you already again partnering with truck makers, whether that's within the Volkswagen Group, for your example, Dieter, or elsewhere, to understand how we might turn to this technology even sooner?
Of course, we have close relations to Scania and to MAN, no? And we communicate with a high frequency to get an idea when this technology will be able to meet our requirements. That's why we are building the bridge. No? But of course, the moment when it's available, the moment after, we will use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a few questions that have come in from the virtual chat. So actually, can I ask my colleague, Rich, do you want to give us?
Yeah, absolutely. So a question coming in on the virtual chat from Johannes Koppel. We have heard that electrification comes with vertical integration, including battery materials, for example. How will this affect supply chain management? That's an open question to the panel.
Yeah, so we recently announced our partnership or our joint venture with Northvolt. So it is something that we, from a supply chain perspective, are involved in. My team, a couple of my engineers were part of the site selection for that, for where that site would be, which is in Torslande in Gothenburg. So I think we absolutely have a role to play in that, and it is something that we're going to see more of.
So if you're talking about vertical integration, it depends what you're doing in-house and what you're buying. No? So battery production, you can have the cell production, you can have the module production, or buy the whole battery. No? But at the end, coming to my thesis, or to my statement, logistics is about transportation from A to B. If I have to transport the cells or the module or the battery, it's more volume that I have to transport. No? But it's not so different from a logistics point of view.
Absolutely. And we did, of course, yesterday, for those of you who were there here, Volkswagen has created effectively a division within the group to build up the Gigafactory network, and of course there will be aspects of that which will be integrated, but as Matthias Braun made quite clear, a lot of this will also be a separate supply chain. We're coming near to the end here. I'll be happy to give the audience another chance if there are, right in the back.
Hello, Renata Schlenderis, Firma Fracht. I would like to ask to whom you prefer priority in digitalization? Integration, the best business practice, business processes, or standardization?
Sorry, Renata, could you just repeat that one more time?
To whom you prefer priority in digitalization? Integration, the best business practice processes, or standardization?
I didn't quite get the context.
No.
I'm sorry, Bernardus, so can...
Standardization. Which where is your more priority? Standardization or business, the best business practice, processes, integration?
Okay, sorry, got it. I think we got it now.
There's an easy answer. We need both. We need both. And we try to integrate a lot of systems. That's one of our big IT projects that's ongoing. We try to integrate a lot of systems. So it's about integration. But we use this IT project to standardize all our processes. So it's a combination of the both. I can do standardization and then for this standard create a new IT system. It's the other way around. I want to create an integrated IT system where a lot of processes are in, but these processes need to be standardized. If I got your question right, then the answer is both.
I can't argue with that.
So yeah, answer C, all of the above. Maybe a chance for one more, yes. Tony.
Hi, Tony Byrne from JLR. You both talked about the adjustments you've had to make within your organisations, how you've had to work with people to empower them, build resilience in your teams, etc. I'm interested what lessons you take individually as leaders out of the disruption we've faced in the last 2 years, how you've had to sort of adapt your personal leadership styles.
What lessons as a leader have you adapted in the last 2 years?
I think we heard this morning a statement that was based on the decentralization of the decisions. And I myself have stated minutes before that I have to bring the decisions to the lowest level possible. But that's only half of the truth. Depends on the situation. On a regular basis, it's like that. But when it comes to a crisis, you need a combination of the both. You have to empower people that they can take the thousands of decisions needed based on a clear strategy, but the strategy has to be adopted every day where we are going. And that's your job as a leader. So the outcome of the last 2 years of crisis and of the empowerment of the people is you need to figure out the ideal combination, not to take too much decision centralized, but at the same moment not take no decision as a leader. And I think that depends on the organization, depends on the empowerment of your people, no? But that's the major outcome, to have a clear view what is needed and to deliver this, and not to do too much of this. So maybe that was part of it.
Yeah, Tony, similar from my side. Empowerment and to enable speed obviously has been something that we've changed quite a lot. But the other side for me as a leader that I've learned is I think I've taken a deeper interest in the well-being of my people. It's just been eye-opening in terms of the amount of pressure that they've worked under over the past 2 years. And if we don't look after them, you know, we're going to fall over, and it's vital that we do that. So investment in people as well has been something that's probably risen up higher than it was.
So then just a last question, I think, to close, and thank you so much for taking all this time with us. It's probably, as we've been discussing the last 2 days, seems as though in logistics, at least, we've seen probably as much change and disruption in the last 2 or 3 years as in the last 20 or 30. But as we're talking about these things, the lessons that we've learned, I want to take forward, what is your vision for building on this and creating a more competitive and strategically advantaged supply chain by 2030? I'll start with you, Sean.
Yeah, it's probably a bit of repetition here in terms of, you know, what we've been talking about, but I think probably 3 areas. The first one has been the power of collaboration and the need for this collaboration, whether it's within our company or but with our logistics partners. That is really something that has made a difference, and we will continue with. The second one, I've spoken about the acceleration of digitalisation. That's been important for us. And then, like I just mentioned now to Tony, our people. Those are probably, investment in our people is something that we need to continue to do going forward.
I agree with all the points.
But with one additional adjustment.
And add one thing, no? To come back to the data. No? I think if we can make a strategic approach as supply chain, and we have to regard all the things what you have said, Sean. No? We have a lot of data available. And if we are able to use this data and to use it and to combine it and to get a deeper understanding and use it to exceed customer demand, customer expectation, to improve our processes and to make our supply chain more resilient. And if we achieve this on a stable, sustainable base in 2030, I think that would be a good achievement and that would be a strategic advantage.
I agree. And no, I certainly agree. Well, this for me has been a very fitting way to close out our conference the last 2 days. Your insights have been very, very interesting, and I appreciate all the questions from the audience as well, both in the room and online. I'm going to thank you both for your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks.